Hello, I've just read chapter 25 of, I almost said Last of the Jedi again. I've read chapter 25 of Coruscant Nights. Well, I think I always said it again then. Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight. So we pick up with Dender and I-5 right, just after Jax has run off. And Den's having multiple thoughts, multiple remarks coming to mind, but he doesn't say any. And he eventually just says to I-5, um, they need to get that deactivator, well, deactivated. And I-5 doesn't reply, and we're told that it's pretty much an essential part, or it's in its primary processor, and so it can't really be removed. But you know, they could probably like put something over it to stop it being turned off, you know, like weld on a little hollow block. But anyway. Um, Maynard then asks, what are they gonna do? I-5 says that he'll follow Jax, see if he gets used to him, and if he doesn't, well, he doesn't know what he'll do then. We're told, and then just starts thinking then, we're told that, because I-5 is a droid, he doesn't have an unconscious, but he starts out, does having sentience mean that an unconscious is basically inevitable? Um, because I-5 is a droid and meant to be incapable of irrational thought. But he starts thinking about this and he very quickly pulls his mind out of it because he thinks it's a quagmire that is more dangerous exploring than a black hole. And the two have some friendly banter. Um, and Dender suggests that, well, if Jax doesn't get used to him, he can always assume his purpose as a nanny droid. And I-5 says, I'd suggest a secondary line of employment if you're going to attempt stand-up comedy. Not to mention turbo lift shoes if you want people to see your act. And then smiles, because now this is some more I-5 that I used to know, because the I-5 of recent has been a bit humorless, and a bit moody. And then he starts to have a bit of a dislike on how Jax was rude to I-5, and again the jealousy starts creeping back in. And then he starts thinking about how he could just turn Jax in. He knows how to do it, he knows how to do it and not have it be traced back to him. But I-5, you know, he's very inquisitive, very relentless in his search. He does not give up in his searches, and he can't be sure if in case I-5 doesn't know anything. And he thinks that it's a little bit extreme to actually turning him just because he was rude to I-5. And he's wondering where this thought even came from, because it feels like it was a thought whispered into his ear, rather than the thoughts that comes to him. Um, and I want to quickly pause this here, because I kind of get that. I don't bring it up a lot on this channel because the videos I make usually don't really have any relevance to this. But I have OCD, and at least with my experience with OCD, you will sometimes just get thoughts that all of a sudden come out of nowhere and seem like they're not even coming from you. And you can get that on quite a regular basis. And they can sometimes be extremely nasty thoughts that you really do not want. And so I kind of get that about how it came out of nowhere, and there was a trigger for the thought. The trigger was Jax being rude to someone he considers a friend, and then and then that trigger. Well, if I had that thought and I was in that situation, for me the trigger would have been the OCD wanting some payback and taking the payback to the extreme, and that you can kind of see that coming in there. It hasn't been confirmed with any OCD, I don't think, and I don't think this has anything to do with it, because sometimes I do just get intrusive thoughts, but so it's quite an interesting thing. Anyway, so continuing, Den shuts the thoughts out of his mind, and he just thinks that if Jax is the last surviving remnant of the Jedi, which is entirely possible, he thinks that he's a bad representative of the Jedi, and he thinks that he's just no Barriss Offee, because Barriss, to him, was everything a Jedi should be. And he later says in this chapter that she was a 1 in a trillion. Then the thoughts start, and then he starts getting the intrusive thoughts again. About how Jax referred to him as Shorty. And then we cut over to Jax and Larenth, who are now at a crater. And Larenth says that Jax is a bit moody at the moment. And Jax just says, look who's talking, or who's not usually. You're calling me moody? And Larenth just ignores him and says that it's a strange droid. And she starts talking about all that chatter about his father, and Jax cuts her off, saying that, you know, he was raised at the temple. He knows his parents made what was probably a hard sacrifice, but they knew he had the potential to be a Jedi, and they handed him over to the temple to become a Jedi. But he does, and then what does he say after that? My parents left me with the temple because I had the potential to be a Jedi. I'm sure it was an agonising decision for them, but they made it for the greater good. I admire them for that, but I don't wish to know anything further about them. Anything else is secondary to their sacrifice. And Larenth raises an eyebrow and says, well, what about your father being a hero to the Republic? And Jax asks why should he believe a droid, and Larenth says why would it lie, and Jax tries to argue, well, perhaps the droid was programmed to lie. Then Den and I-5 come running along, and Jax just hands out his arm, extends his arm, and says that he wants to apologise for turning off Den's droid, and Den says to not apologise to him, to apologise to I-5, and that I-5 is his own master. And this completely baffles Jax again, and he feels like he's misheard him, but no, he's heard him correctly. And I-5 says that there's really no need to apologise, and that Jax couldn't have known about the mutual agreement he and Lorm Pavin had about finding Jax. So he's the one who should apologise. And Dender gets frustrated at this remark from I-5, saying that you're just gonna let this offence, you're just gonna let him go without any repercussions. And I-5 just says that he's not programmed to take offence. And Jones says that he's gonna take offence for them both. And Jax is starting to get tired of this, so he tries to mind trick them, and then just says, "Oh, to just stop," and that he's spent months in a rimsu on Drongar, and that he saw Barisofi doing that to help patients all the time. And then Jax goes, Barisofi, you knew Barisofi, and Jen says that yes, and she starts listing off some of the great qualities about her, and then Jax says that she's dead. And both Den and I5 have a look of sadness. And Den asks how has she died, and Jax says that that he doesn't know, and that he just sensed it through the Force, but he knows she's dead. And then says that he thought something like that had happened, but he just didn't want to believe it. And then Jax is just glad that I5 hasn't said, and he hasn't given any sad remarks, because he didn't think he'd like the droid saying anything like that to him. And I5 says that they should go, and both Jax and Namath sense danger, and then in a frustrated way he says, can you please tell me what's going on? I don't want to be the only one who doesn't have all this sensey stuff. And I5 picks turned up with one arm, crazy him like an oversized baby, as some of the book says. And they start running, and I5 says to him, well, with your oversized ears, you shall probably hear them soon. And Jen goes, oh yeah, I hear the repulsor lifts now. And he asks what they are, and Jax explains that they're PCBUs, police cruiser backup units. And Namath says that the Emperor's not giving up on that data so easily, and Jax says, as a final line of the chapter, it's not the Emperor, it's Vader, and it's not just after the data, he's after him. And that's where we end the chapter. Again, it's Den and I5, you can't beat them. They're great in this chapter. Particularly when discussing, especially when they talk with Jax and Namath. The whole conversation with that just feels very camp. Like, you can just imagine that conversation being a very camp, exaggerated conversation in how they talk. There's a bunch of funny and devastating things in this chapter. You got the sentimental stuff with Den and I5, where I5 is giving Den tips on what to do if he does the stand-up comedy in a truthful but rude way, which Den doesn't really take much offence to. We see, Den's intrusive thoughts coming through, which I think is actually, again, quite interesting. And we're told that it feels like the thought just came out of nowhere, and how it's something that he also says, even if I5 doesn't find out, he'd know he'd done that. And that there was just no way you could justify handing someone over to the Empire just because they were rude. So yeah, that was quite an interesting thing. Again, we see a bit more of Jax about how he doesn't really want any connection to his family, and how the droids kind of just came out of nowhere and is just throwing all of this on top of him, and how again he just doesn't want any connections to his family, and he isn't massively keen on droids. He doesn't have anything against them, as we said, but to him they're just machines that do as they're told. They're not anything special. So when you have I5 here, who is more sentient than the other droids, it's quite it's a bit much for Jax, and you can see that. Then with the whole conversation between Jax, Namath, Den, and I5 in this chapter, it's either that comedy gold or very devastating with the Barry Sophie bits. Like, I was thinking when reading the chapter, oh, then say that you knew Barry Sophie, and of course he brings it that he did, and I thought, that maybe that would make Jackson and a bit more inclined to trust them. But yeah, and you really understand how Den felt in this chapter when he learns Barry Sophie is dead. He says that he knew that had probably happened, but he just didn't want to believe it. And you can understand why he felt that way, especially with what we've heard about how... Now, I haven't read any of the other books Den is in. This is my first experience of Den and I-5. I know they're in Mauled Shadow Hunter, and I think they're in a couple other books as well, like MedStar, but I haven't read any of them. But you can really see how devastated Den is, and how you can really tell he really did admire Barry's. And keep in mind, I want to make it very clear, this is the Barry Sophie in Legends, and this was written before TCW came out, so it was released in the same year as TCW, as a TCW movie, but it was before, you know, the whole Barry Sophie evil storyline came out. I have read Evasive Action, which apparently the Coruscant Nights is meant to have some references to. And in Evasive Action, we do see Barry Sophie get killed on Felucia. So yeah. But yeah, we see just how devastated Den and I-5 are. And it's really interesting to see, you know, I-5 being just more defeated here, because throughout the entirety of the book so far, you know, he's been very eager and very, again, but for lack of a better word, relentless. Relentless sounds a bit more malicious, but I mean, he just doesn't give up. That's what I mean by relentless here. He just hasn't given up on, he just doesn't give up on his missions. Now he's a bit clueless because, you know, Jax doesn't really want to have anything to do with him. And you understand why it feels that way. Then, of course, you got the funny bits in this chapter, particularly at the end, where they're crowing and I-5 says that, well, with those big ears, you should probably hear them now, and Den's going, oh yeah, well, I hear them now. And of course you got the mind trick that Jax tries to do on Den, and now Den just completely shuts him off halfway through his command. So yeah, this chapter has a bunch of really just good moments. It's a very good chapter. It's just got a bunch of good moments in there. So yeah, and again, I'm glad it focused on I-5 and Den as well, because again, I think so far they've just been the highlights of the book. They've been the best characters in the book so far. They're just such a great dynamic. They're so funny, and so sweet to read as well. They're just great. They are. They're just great. Anyway, I think that brings an end to this review. I don't have much else to say. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Hello everyone, I have just read chapter, was it 26? Yeah, 26 of Coruscant Nights, Jedi Twilight. Now I'm officially over 200 pages through the book, which is quite impressive for me, considering I usually struggle with 300-page books. I usually really do struggle with them. I think one of the reasons I think I've been able to enjoy this book as much as I have, and hopefully I haven't jinxed the rest of the book, is just because of how short the chapters are. They're not much longer than the chapters in Last of the Jedi. And I think it's also because of just how many chapters there are. There's about 40 chapters in this book. Compare that to something like Darth Plagueis, where there was 30. There's 46 in this book. I think Plagueis had about 31, and then you have the epilogue and prologue of that book. And it was a bit more of a struggle to get through Plagueis, and again, that was also my first time properly reading a 300-page book. I did really struggle with Mindor, because that had 16 chapters, I think. 16, 17, 18. And that was 300 pages, so the chapters were really long. I still dread that 50-page chapter, which makes up a significant portion of that book. But yeah, anyway, got a bit off topic there. I have, so we basically pick up with Caird, who's looking at Shizor, who's walking through the streets, and we don't really have a whole lot to talk about in this chapter. But Caird is watching Shizor, and he's in a Caird is in a Kubar's disguise. The same thing as the Imperial spy from A New Hope. I'm trying to remember his name. It begins with a G. I can't remember what it is though. But he's watching Shizor walk through the streets, and he's wearing a skin tight suit or something. I don't remember what the exact description. But even though he's trying to be discreet, he commands power, and anyone who looks at him can tell he's important. And we're told that Caird could just kill Shizor right now. He could just shoot at him right now, because he's looking at him from a, what was it described as? It was some sort of balcony. I don't remember the exact words. Loggia. And we're told a little bit about, a bit more about Caird's hunt and Shizor. We're told that Shizor's fought against another muscular human, and Shizor's quite muscular. And even though we're not directly told who won the fight, it implies that Shizor won the fight and may have even killed the human. And we're told that Caird isn't stupid enough to just go and fight Shizor head on. But he's an assassin, so he's more practiced in indirect ways of attack anyway. And we're told that he could just shoot Shizor now. He's at a vantage point. But even though Caird has state-of-the-art technology, Shizor has incredible technological defences. And we're told about some of the stuff he could have, which could be stuff that reflects the blaster bolts right back at Caird. It could be something that makes Shizor look to be about 2 or 3 steps in front of where he actually is, or 2 or 3 steps behind where he actually is, which of course would then alert Shizor to any danger. And we're also told that Caird... Oh, I don't want to check if I'm missing anything in Caird's bit of the chapter. Oh yeah, Caird does also think of poisoning Shizor. And we're told that Caird isn't going to kill Shizor just yet, because he could even find the droid. And we're told that if Caird brings Bug Eyes to Underlord Perhy, that might speed up his departure to go back home to Nedige. And that's where we leave off with Caird, and we pick back up with Rhinann. And this chapter reminded me about a couple of things with Rhinann. First off, he has a very neat and tidy connapt. I've completely forgot about the very first chapter with Rhinann and how we're told about how he likes things very neat, very tidy, precise. I completely forgot about that. And we're also reminded about Rhinann's 4 stomachs, which I forgot about. And we're told that he's just trying to meditate and relieve himself of all the fear and he's feeling. We're basically told that after seeing how fear-struck Nick was, Rhinann's basically just spiraled, and he's just wondering when is it going to be his turn that he gets cast aside and killed, because he knows that it will probably eventually happen. And we're told that he's gotten very nasty, itchy rashes, and he often has to go into the refresher, which is basically just a shower, and have to have medications and stuff just to temporarily relax it all, and has to sleep it all off. and we're told just about how much he fears Vader, and he's starting to fear him even more ever since he helped Nick into the turbo lift, and seeing just how terrified Nick was. And again, we're just told about how much that's really impacted Rhinann, and how he's just wondering when it's going to be his turn, because even though even though he's very good at his job, and very few are as good as him, or as the book says, horrendous thoughts, better than him, the work he does is something where he can be replaced. And he just wonders when's it going to be his time, because he knows that he can't leave this job, not when the apprentice and the master are force sensitive. And we're told about how he has, and we're reminded, this was something I also forgot about his fascination with the force, and how he wished to study and experience it. And he just thought that he's never gonna get that. He's never gonna be able to do that, and he starts to sit up after leaving his meditation, which hasn't really worked for him. Breathing in and out doesn't really help Rhinann much at all. But he gets up, and we're told that his joints crack in protest because he's getting quite old now. And eventually his comlink goes off, and a droid tells him that Vader's requesting his presence, and Rhinann, and it cuts off, and Rhinann thinks, what does he think? I want to read his thoughts out here. Interesting phrase. And am I next? That's what his thoughts are, and that's when we're told about how he's irreplaceable. The job he does, even though he does it very well, he's replaceable, and we're told that he knows it and Vader knows it, and that's pretty much where we end off the chapter. Firstly, I'm really happy. I'm at 200 pages in. The next page will be page 202. So, yeah, it's taken me a little while to get through the book, but then again, it took me a while to get through Mindor. It took me about 2 weeks to get through Mindor. I know I got through Plagueis in a week, but that was like that's usually a rarity for me. Okay, it's almost been 2 weeks since I started this book. Okay, it's going to be 2 days time. Since I started the book. Okay. But yeah, it's been an interest. This has definitely been an interesting book so far. And this chapter, again, the bit with Caird, there's not really a whole lot to talk about, but we haven't really seen the assassin Caird. We've seen the more plotting Caird, and so it's going to be interesting to see how his assassin skills come in, because we've heard of Caird's skills as an assassin, but we haven't really seen them yet. And again, it's going to be interesting to see if Caird was the one who killed Lorne Pavan. It would not surprise me if he was. Maybe he isn't. Again, Lorne Pavan appeared in Shadowhunter, I believe, so maybe we see him die in that book. If so, then maybe it isn't Caird. So yeah, but maybe it is Caird. Maybe it is. With the bit with Rhinann, you can't just see how he's starting to just fall apart. You can see how he's just struggling to hold himself together at this point. He's literally crumbling in fear. He's struggling to keep himself together with how much he's fearing for his own life, how much he fears Vader. In a way, you feel for him, but also after chapter 22 and how much that chapter went into racism a bit, Rhinann has partook in that. You also don't. It's also a little bit hard to feel sympathy for him after that. So yeah, but there's bits, but you can also in a way, feel sympathy for Rhinann about, you know, he's just trying to do his job, and he's been saved by Vader from a life that would have been even harder. But now he still feels as if he's trapped, as if his days are still numbered. And I think I spoiled myself looking at his page on Wikipedia, accidentally saying that he dies. However, I do not check his appearance list, so maybe that's in a book that isn't Coruscant Nights, but I highly doubt it for some reason. I have a feeling he is going to die in these books, but, you know, maybe he dies in, like, Death Star, because apparently Dender's in that book, maybe Rhinann's in that one as well. But yeah, I did also spoil myself on 11th Tarak getting killed at one point. But anyway, yeah, it's really strange with Rhinann, because we getting into his thoughts, and there's bits of his character you really do not like. You really do not like certain bits of his character, like the racism he's got. But then in the more, but then there is bits of sympathy where you can understand where he's coming from. So he's a very interesting character, just because of this certain amalgamation of stuff that you got with him, and so he's a very interesting character. You understand his fear. I want to have a quick skim through the Rhinann bit of the chapter again. Just want to see if I've missed anything. Oh yeah, he's never physically been hurt by Vader, aside from like that one time he was force choked earlier in the book. But he's never been physically hurt by Vader, nor has he ever been threatened. He's just scared of Darth Vader because he is Darth Vader. And we told a little bit about how he thinks of Vader and how Vader probably thinks of himself. He thinks he's doing holy work. He thinks he's, you know, bringing peace and serenity. And we're told about with Rhinann's various experiences with species. Very few think of themselves as evil. They usually come up with rationalizations and how does the book describe it? And denial. To basically justify themselves and their actions. So yeah, it's very. So yeah, it's a very. I think Rhinann's proving to be one of the more thought-provoking characters. If 10 and I-5 are the just complete or just the enjoyment characters, Rhinann's starting to become one of the more interesting, thought-provoking characters. I'm so it's yeah, he's a very It's very interesting to see his thoughts and stuff. Yeah, Rhinann's quite intriguing. He's quite intriguing, and it's a shame because it sounds like he might be getting killed soon, or maybe not. It's what's Vader summoning him for unless because he's already kind of done his part of the work, you know. There's not really much plot relevance left for him unless it's something else. But anyway, I think that brings an end to this review. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye.